Coming up on Colonial Crossfire. Shutdown avoided for now. Closing in on tax overhaul. And several major cases in the Supreme Court. Joining us on the left, Levi DeBose. And on the right, Allison Kukos. And I'm your moderator, Casey Decker. From the GWTV studios in Washington, D.C., this is Colonial Crossfire. It's been a big week on Capitol Hill. Just days ago, Congress reached a last-minute agreement to temporarily avoid a government shutdown. But with no full budget yet passed, trouble is still on the horizon. Also in play, major tax legislation. The Senate barely pushed through its bill, and now groups from both parties and both houses will meet in conference to try to hammer out a final deal. Here to discuss all of that and more, our student panel. On the left, Levi DeBose, a junior from Houston, Texas, majoring in political science. Levi is the former communications director of the GW College Democrats. And on the right, Allison Kukos, a senior from Newton, Massachusetts, majoring in political science and minoring in business administration. Allison is the chair of the GW College Republicans. Thank you to both of us for joining us tonight. Let's jump right into it. First of all, the threat of a government shutdown. How likely is it? Levi, we'll start with you.
Well, I think especially with this new budget resolution that just got passed over the past, 12 hours, I think that we're going to actually see a government that's funded. And it's something that I'm glad that we're able to see. We always want a funded government. We always want to provide services to the full majority of America. We want to make sure that everyone can get that passed. Now, the problem is this. If Republicans have a problem on their side of the aisle passing a real thorough budget through, the Democrats will have votes. And you're going to have to go and have protections for dreamers, and you're going to have to pass CHIP in order to get that budget through. These are simple things. Nothing there is too extreme. Nothing there is overly ambitious. These are policies and ideas that have been widely accepted across all of American politics. It's something. There were 32 Republicans who just came out for DACA and for protecting dreamers. So this is something that's not shocking at all. If they have problems on their side, we would love to see DACA's fully put into legislation and CHIP funded as well. Even if not, we would want to see those things because it's just for the betterment of America.
Allison, how likely do you think a shutdown is before the end of the year?
I don't think a shutdown is imminent at all, given the fact that they did pass the spending bill and the House and the Senate's expected to do the same. I think on that front, we're fine. Now, I know that they do need Democrat votes to pass a full budget, and given that there's DACA, there's CHIP, I know they'll probably want to lower some defense spending as well, but those are separate issues. The Dreamers, and I think given the fact that a good amount of Republicans do support legislation to protect Dreamers, that's not something that's uncommon. But that's a totally separate issue. And I think with the budget, if you can focus on the core spending and you lower spending, and given the fact that we have the tax reform coming up too, if you can focus on just making sure you have those in place and making sure that spending is in check, we'll be fine.
Nonetheless, we are coming down to the wire here, and Congress has spent a great deal of time on other issues that don't have to deal with the budget. Should Congress have paid more attention to the budget so that we don't have this kind of brinksmanship?
I think we had a government shutdown in 2013 under the Obama administration. It's not, these stalemates do happen. I think the budget deserves attention, and the fact that it has been neglected for a while is a problem, and it's a problem with a majority of Congresses. And so I think in the future, if they could focus on that from the get-go instead of this political brinksmanship that's come down to now, that would be ideal for everyone involved.
It would be remiss for me not to bring up that budget shutdown or that government shutdown was brought by Senator Ted Cruz from my state of Texas. And Texans did not like them after that shutdown because it was his fault, almost 100%.
Now, Ted Cruz held up those budget deals in order to try to repeal Obamacare. Will Democrats hold up these budget deals in order to try to make sure that a DREAM Act is passed?
Well, we can't hold up anything. They have the power. They have all of the power to pass a budget resolution that they need.
You need
now,
60
if they
votes,
need,
though.
if they need votes on our side, we have DACA protections, protecting dreamers, and CHIP. These are two very, very simple things that when polled across the American public are widely
But you're
accepted.
saying it's likely
These
that
should have been
Democrats
done a
will
while
not
ago.
provide those 60 votes without a DREAM Act, without CHIP.
That's something that, again, most Americans would agree with, and we don't need to give them votes for any reason.
Immigration is different than the budget, though.
Well, also look at your tax reform bill. You have repealing the Obamacare individual mandate. It's just not something that, oh,
it is a tax,
it's surprising.
Now, if the government shuts down, I want to ask both of you, if the government does shut down, if the Democrats refuse to provide the 60 votes, whose fault will it be? Allison, you go first.
I think it'll be both parties' fault, to be totally honest. I think the Republicans do have a majority in the Senate, we have a majority in the House, and we have a Republican president. So to that extent, it is important that the Republicans get something done. But if the Democrats hold up votes, I think it just plays into their resistance method. And the fact of the matter is, Congress and the way the political system works is through bipartisanship. It's through compromise. And if the Democrats aren't willing to work with the Republicans to pass a budget, it's both of their faults.
Same question to you, Lee.
So look, this to me is very simple. There is a way that Congress could have had a budget passed. If they came in working on infrastructure, bipartisanly, if they came in trying to look for a true solution to healthcare, bipartisanly, I don't think it would be too tough to actually pass through a budget that is both sides are able to work on, that's bipartisan, and that passes with widespread support, and that the majority of America likes. But instead, they went with the policy where they go through and try and ram down health care, they try and ram down tax reforms, and the more they do that, the more the Democratic senators and the Democratic people in America get a little bit upset. And the reason why is because we feel like we're being ignored. So now that they need our help, we're not going to come and run over if we've been ignored over and over and over again. This, again, would be in any other circumstance, if it was just normal, regular order, this would probably be passed with widespread support if they came and talked to Democrats first. But since they haven't done that at all this session, I would be very pessimistic to see any type of bill that is formulated that is not just completely trying to gut and ram through anything.
All right, Allison, looks like you have a
Can
response.
I do. I think it's somewhat laughable saying Republicans are ramming down legislation down people's throats when the Democrats, to their credit, have basically gotten rid of regular order starting with Obamacare. My favorite quote from then Speaker Pelosi was, "You have to pass it to see what's in it." I think that set a certain tone that we just sort of need to pass things to figure out what's going to happen. The Republicans have at least been transparent in their efforts. I think with Obamacare, people didn't even know what was going on. So to that extent, the Republicans have been making tax reform known. They made the health care bill known. And so to that extent, yeah.
A lot to talk about here, but I do think we're going to move on now to taxes because that's another big issue that we want to give some attention to. The House passed a bill just a few weeks ago. Then the Senate passed theirs very narrowly. That process was a bit messy, though. So it included writing amendments by hand right on the bill. So let's take a look at this video from Montana Democrat Joe Tester. It went viral on the internet. Take a look.
This is the tax bill. See how thick it is? That's what it looks like. Oh, no, let's look at the bill. This is what it really looks like. I want you to take a look at this, folks. This is your government at work.
So real quick, I said Joe Tester, I meant John Tester. Let's get to the debate now. Allison, is this an acceptable way of doing business?
It's unconventional, that's for sure, but I think it is necessary. I am a full supporter of passing tax reform, and I think however you have to do that, that's what you have to do. And so while I know that my Democratic counterpart and the Democrats generally will probably disagree and say this is unacceptable, I think the Republicans are trying. And they're trying to make this work. And I think the current tax plan is cumbersome. It's a burden on Americans. And they're trying to simplify it. They're trying to make life better for the average American. And so any way that they can do that, I'm in full support of.
Levi, your response.
Yeah, so first of all, going back when she said that we ramped through things with Obamacare, well, she fails to look at the full picture of 2009, where we worked bipartisanly with Republicans on stimulus package. We worked bipartisanly with Republicans working on the Ledbetter Act. We did a slew of things in 2009 and in 2010 that worked bipartisanly with Republicans.
Getting to taxes.
Now, on taxes, this idea that, at least we showed you the bill, is just not true. I have friends who were actually sitting in the gallery of the Senate floor that night, did not see the bill at all until it was put on Democratic and Republican senators' desk nearly 45 minutes before the vote. 45 minutes. I don't know how you can read a 529-page document in 45 minutes, but you guys have some speed readers over there in that Republican caucus, I have to say.
Now, clearly, there's a lot of things in that bill that Democrats aren't going to like. Do you have any hope of influencing that in the conference committee?
In any other period with regular order, I would have hope. I would have hoped that Republicans would listen. But again, as I've already stated, Democrats have been ignored throughout this process. We've been ignored throughout this whole Trump presidency. And it's frustrating to us. And the reason why it's frustrating to us is because we have never gotten, except for there was one passed on this tax reform bill. Can you name another amendment that has been added to a bill that has been a Democratic bill on either health care or on tax reform? One amendment.
Let's not focus on that, and let's focus on the fact that the Democrats are the
problem.
resistance. I mean,
we're not the resistance.
yes,
first
you
of
are.
all.
You're self-styling yourselves as the resistance. Schumer and Pelosi, people are opposed to Trump. They're opposed to the Republicans, and they're not trying to let them do anything. The Republicans at least try to work bipartisanly with Democrats. The Democrats aren't giving the same courtesies to Republicans.
I would like to say that being opposed to the president and being opposed to the other party is the reason for an opposition party.
Well,
We're
there's
supposed
addition to an
be
opposition party, and then just
But
being
parties-
completely adamant about not getting anything done because you don't support the president.
Again, we have from the beginning, as soon the day after President Trump got elected, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren both came out and said if he actually wants to make real progress on infrastructure, we would join in. Day one, we will join in.
But we're
and
not
try
talking
and
about
influence the
infrastructure, we're
process.
talking about tax
Exactly.
reform.
But instead, that didn't happen. Instead, what happens is they try and ram through health care without asking a single Democrat about
Well,
it,
let's talk
without
about the fact
asking
that
the
the
American people
Democrats-
about it. And that's where we have a problem, where you're starting to ram through legislation without having any type of hearings, without having amendments, and then you wonder,
The Democrats
why
have done
is
the
this
same thing. This
when-
is the point with Obamacare. I mean,
Obamacare had 800,
let's talk about the
around
fact, though,
829
with the
amendments, to my
the
idea.
conference
Not-
committee, there are points of agreement. The fact that they want to increase standard deductions, we want to increase the child's tax credit, the fact that we're trying to lower the small business tax, the pass-through tax. These are all points that we should be agreeing on. Lowering the corporate tax rate is beneficial for all Americans.
So on this issue, do you think then that this conference committee will be able to create a bill that's passable in both the House and Senate and that will become law?
I hope for the American people's sake that it does, because the fact of the matter is, despite the fact that we have been unprecedented economic growth and unemployment's at all-time lows, American wages are stagnant, and we need something to make sure the American people continue to prosper. This tax reform is going to do that. If you lower the corporate tax rate, if you simplify the tax code, if you're increasing standard deductions for individuals, that's how you're going to get economic growth. And I hope the Democrats can put their resistance aside and work with the Republicans to get something done that'll benefit all Americans.
You think that'll happen?
I want to say something about the standard deductions and the child health or tax credit. Of course, yeah, those are great things, but they're only around for 2, 3, 4 years. They go away. They start to phase away for middle-class families. Now, for the wealthiest Americans, they stay, and you're able to continue that type of growth. But the problem with tax cuts have historically been, yes, they're good for the first 2 or 3 years. Reagan in '86, they were good for the first 3 years until 1990 came around and George H.W. Bush lost because the tax credits did not pan out the way they wanted to. Same thing with George W. Bush. He passed tax reform in 2003. In 2006, 7, 8, you start to see economic regression. So that is the problem with tax reform.
There
Yes,
was a
it
real estate bubble, in the tax.
Why?
Wall
Because
Street
that
was-
tax bill just fed money, and also a lot of Republicans going through and knocking off banking regulations like they're doing right now. They're filling a plan to completely change Dodd-Frank.
Which was a terrible piece of legislation, but
And
We're running out of time on this segment. Real quickly, either way, if a tax bill passes, if a tax bill is unable to pass, how do you think that will affect the 2018 midterms?
I think if the tax bill passes, 2018 Republicans will yield to it because Americans will see increase in take-home wages. They'll see the fact that we are more competitive and more money will be coming home from overseas because we'll be lowering our corporate tax rate. You'll be seeing people investing more in houses, in physical assets. Americans will continue to prosper under this tax reform, and I think if we do that, and 2018 comes around and Americans are seeing those economic growth and they're seeing that increase in take-home wages, Republicans have a great shot.
Levi, what do you think will
So
happen?
I think that's a great fantasy land. When you go and look at the polling, you have 40% strongly disapprove of this tax plan. You have 40% think that their taxes are going to go up. You're going to have,
It's been poorly advertised by the mainstream media, but
I mean, most viewers in America watch Fox. It's the most viewed.
All right, let's focus again on this.
But back on the bill, 68% see that when you change the ACA through tax reform legislation, they disapprove of that. Because this bill was not crafted bipartisanly, you will see voters understand that this bill is not as good as it can be. And when it's not as good as it can be, the voters do punish bad bills. And this is a bad bill.
Like Obama.
All right, a very heated debate on that issue.
It's still
Maybe we'll
on.
have another one coming up after the break. That's it for Congress, but we're going to talk about the Supreme Court when we come back, so stay tuned.
The George Washington University, at the intersection of policy, practice, and research, connecting all that Washington has to offer with an intellectual environment that drives progress, transforming vision into action, offering learning experiences that are rigorous, real-time, and real-world. In a city shaping the future, George Washington is a place where faculty and students don't just study the world, they work to change it.
It's Supreme Court season in Washington, a big decision on the travel ban, and arguments on issues ranging from gerrymandering to discrimination. First, the travel ban. The Supreme Court last week deciding to allow the latest edition of the president's controversial policy to remain in effect for now. They'll formally consider its legality later on. But in the short term, heavy restrictions will go into effect on people attempting to travel to America from several different countries. Allison, you first. Is this a sign the president finally got it right on this issue?
Well, I would say it's a sign that the president has the power to do this. I think the fact of the matter is, and I will concede, they were ill-conceived in the beginning. They were poorly laid out. They were poorly rolled out. And so I think this third time, it's much more concrete. There's much more structure to it. And I think it shows that in terms of executive orders and this type of policy, the president does have the authority to do this. Now, it's still ongoing, but I think at the end of the day, people need to respect the fact and not play judicial activist when they're ruling on these cases.
Levi, did the court make the right decision here?
So I think that, can the president do it? Sure. But if we're going to base everything based off if the president can do it, well, that means it has to be good. No, it's not. It doesn't matter. It does matter how legal it is. And if it is legal, that's just the first bar. I'm not going to have the bar put at legality. I'm going to look at if it's actually a good policy, if it's actually meant to better America, or if it's just another political ploy that's used by Republicans to divide people.
I don't think it's being a ploy to divide people, though. The fact of the matter is, people are saying it's a Muslim ban. It's not. Government officials from Venezuela are included, North Korea. And I think the fact of the matter is, the world is dangerous right now. And I think if we neglect that, there have been terrorist attacks. There was an assassination plot against Theresa May in England. The fact of the matter is, these are problems, and we need to address them. And Trump views this as a potential for addressing that issue.
Now, those country selections, though, you mentioned they're not all Muslim nations, but they do seem to be somewhat random. There's a lot of terrorist activity that's come out of other countries that aren't on the ban. Is this ban really, is it worth so much fight from the president to support something that so far we haven't really seen whether or not it's going to be at all effective?
I think the fact of the matter is, right now, it's a precautionary measure. And I think when they continue to go through the court system and once they rule in the legality, and if it is legal, I think they should take another look at it and say, how are we going to improve this? Because we do need safety precautions in place to protect American citizens from terrorists. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing, keeping American lives safe. And so when they look at it again, if they see different countries and with more hotbed activity, add them. That's what you need to do. I mean, it's not necessarily pretty, it's not necessarily nice, but safety should be the biggest priority for Americans.
Levi, your thoughts on the country selection?
I agree that safety should be the biggest priority. And that's why when you look at this list, the first list, the second list, the third list, and now this one, you see some weird reasoning for why they're picking these random countries out of nowhere. I have not seen a plan from the president on Venezuela, on how to address any of the problems in Venezuela. I really haven't seen a plan from the president of how to really effectively address ISIS. If these were serious safety concerns that the president was really concerned about and not a political ploy, I honestly believe that he may have some type of plan to combat these problems, not just putting a wide-ranging travel ban on them. Again, if you want to block out refugees from there, okay, fine. But if you're not going to stop the problem in the first place, that's just a move that an American
Allison, what
leader
effect
should
do you
not
think
make.
this ban will have in the immediate term?
I hope it keeps Americans safe. And I think given the fact that it includes other countries like North Korea and Venezuela, I think it's sending a political signal that there are certain actions that we're just not going to tolerate. If you are a hotbed for terrorism and you have those people coming overseas, we're not going to tolerate that. And I think that's what this shows, and I hope that other countries take it seriously.
Levi, is it right that the court has so much, it seems, executive power here, the ability to determine policy like this?
You know, I think that the court is within its purview to determine if a policy is legal under the Constitution or not. Again, I always put my trust in the Supreme Court. I may not agree with every single decision, but I honestly believe that they are looking at all the facts and they're trying to consider the best logical solution. In this case, may it have been legal, yes, but that's not the bar that America should and could set. We have to set a higher bar. So again, when you have this whole claim of, oh, he's trying to make America safe, and I see no actual policies addressing the problems at the back, all I see is a political ploy. I honestly don't believe that this is a policy from its beginning to now that has actually addressed safety in America. If you want to address safety in America, find out where the problems are and go deal with those problems and have a formulaic plan that not only betters the world, not only betters America's national security, but also makes the world a safer place.
Allison, are the courts in their purview here real quickly?
I think the court has the right to rule on the legality of these issues. The fact of the matter is, though, they should be solely focusing on that. I think when you saw with the lower federal courts in Hawaii, for example, some of these judges are becoming part of the resistance. They're being activist courts. That's not their job. And until Democrats realize the job of the court system is to rule on the facts of the case and not what they think and they decide is the best option, then we'll have a better court system. And I think right now the fact that the court ruled in favor of Trump, it shows that they're ruling on the facts.
Levi, brief response, and then we'll move on
brief
to
response. Yeah, they're ruling in favor for him now, but this has taken 4 travel bans to go through. They've had to amend it every single month or so. This is just, it's absurd. And it's something that, is he legal to do it now? Sure, he's legal to do it. It's not good for the country. It hasn't been. There's no real plan or policy behind it.
Just because you don't see it doesn't mean something isn't happening behind the scenes.
I think something's happening behind the scenes. General Mattis is doing a pretty good job defeating ISIS, but it's not coming from the president.
Okay, we're going to move on to another issue before the courts this week. The justices heard the case of Masterpiece Cake Shop in Colorado, where several years ago, a gay couple was refused a wedding cake by the baker. That baker argues his First Amendment right to free religion and expression mean he cannot be compelled to build them a custom cake. Here's that baker on the courthouse steps.
That the justices need to look at this situation and rule in favor of creative professionals like myself so that we can continue to create freely according to our conscience.
Levi, you first. Do you agree that artisans shouldn't be forced to create products for uses they disapprove of?
You know, yeah, I in general agree with that, but, and this is a big but, until it infringes on another person's civil rights and civil liberties. From my reading and from federal law, being homosexual and being a couple is federally protected law. You can do that. You shouldn't be discriminated against when you are that. So that's where I have problems with this case, is that this artist decided that he wasn't going to do anything because he felt as if, oh, I don't need to serve them like I serve any other customer because of who they are.
Allison, are religious beliefs an acceptable reason to effectively refuse service to a same-sex couple?
Yeah. I want to caveat this one saying yes. I think the Wall Street Journal, I'm going to quote them on this, they said this case essentially pits the government's interest in social equality against an individual's constitutional right to express his beliefs. But these democratic values aren't incompatible if the justices respect America's pluralistic tradition that lets people of good faith disagree. And essentially what I'm trying to get at here is, when you take these two issues, it's not like he's saying, oh, because of my religious beliefs, I'm not going to serve anyone who is gay. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, I'm, as an artist, and when you're creating a custom cake as a piece of art, that's protected under his First Amendment rights. And the fact of the matter is, it is. And so if he doesn't want to bake a custom cake as a private business owner for a gay couple, that's okay. If he was saying, I'm not going to serve anyone because they are gay, that's
Levi,
wrong.
do you agree that these type of creative expressions like custom cakes are a form of protected speech?
I don't think so. So let's go back to this artist. She says that, oh, I'll serve them, but I won't serve them in the way that, I would serve any other customer, because I don't agree with that.
He stopped making the custom cakes, by the way.
So here goes my problem. He's an artist. Who else is an artist? Is a hair designer an artist? Are they able, when a person comes into their studio or into their like hairstyle or
Salon, I think is
salon.
the word you're looking
Yeah,
for.
that's the word I'm looking for. I don't get my hair done too
Yeah.
often. But when people go to a salon and they try and wonder, oh, can I get this haircut? And you go, oh no, you're African American, so we don't do that type of haircut here. Where does
That's a very different thing, I would argue.
Why is it different? Both are federally protected classes of law. Both of them are basically the same scenario.
One is saying, I'm not doing this because of my morals. And I want to point out the fact that when this artist essentially tried to make cakes with vulgar messages, he didn't, because it's protected by law. When people asked to make cakes that oppose same-sex marriage and had pieces of using these as art to essentially oppose same-sex marriage, he couldn't, because the Colorado essentially said you can't do that. And so what's happening here is you're taking forms of speech you dislike and saying, well, we're not going to let you do this because we dislike that. And when you do that, you're setting a very dangerous precedent saying only certain types of speech are acceptable. When you're playing with someone's religious values, essentially, which is what's happening here, and saying you're not allowed to, uphold your moral scruples because we disagree with you. This is America. This isn't France, where we completely take religion out of the public sphere. Yes, there is a separation of church and state, but Americans have the freedom of expression, and I think that's the heart of this case. And as a private business owner, he should be allowed to do that.
So I'll change up my analogy, because you're right. It is religious. So imagine if that hairstyler decided to come up and say, oh, religiously, I can't give an African-American person that haircut. What difference does...
I feel like that's a very different thing, because if there's a religion that opposes African-Americans, that's a totally separate issue than saying...
I'm a Christian, and in general, you would say that they would oppose gay marriage.
The Catholic Church is opposed to gay marriage. I know some,
so
Christian
it's
sects
still
are as well.
both. It's the same idea. Both are federally protected classes, and yes, I agree
But it's a
that
private business, though. That's the difference.
It doesn't matter if it's.
If I didn't want to serve someone just because I didn't want to, I should have that right to.
It doesn't,
regardless.
because private businesses should not be able to discriminate, which is going against the federally protected class. That is discrimination against someone.
But you're saying, okay, it's discrimination, but at the same time, as a private citizen who has his own personal beliefs, is he not allowed to express those?
He's able to express those until he discriminates against someone.
But he stopped selling these custom cakes in general, so now no one has them. And it's not saying he's discriminating him point
that's
blank.
Fine.
It's the fact that he still serves them.
All right, I think we're going to have to wrap it up here. Another really good debate between the two of you. We'll be excited to hear from the Supreme Court what their decision on this is. After the break, it's rapid fire, so stay with us for more hot debate here on Colonial Crossfire.
We have a big problem on college campuses, and it's on us to stop it.
It's happening at bars, at parties, even in residence halls.
It's happening to our friends, and it's happening to our teammates.
It is called sexual assault, and it has to stop.
There's no consent, or someone can't consent. It's rape. It's assault.
It's wrong, and it's a crime.
If I saw it happening, I would do something about it.
If I saw it happening, I'd speak up.
If I saw it happening, I'd help, not blame.
Because I don't want to be part of the problem.
I want to be part of the solution.
We need all of you to be part of the solution.
This is about respect. It's about responsibility.
It's up to all of us to put an end to sexual assault.
Because one is too many.
And it's on us to stop it.
Great journalism matters because it's critical to a democracy that the public is informed and engaged and involved. And that happens by having credible information. And so the most important thing, whatever the delivery platform, whatever the technology, whatever the business model, is that the information itself is coming in solid and important ways and is being conveyed in compelling ways because there's so much noise and competition out there. And so that's what I really want our students to be able to do. Be brilliant storytellers, keen observers, and compelling communicators.
Our panel joins us again now for rapid fire. Some quick answers to some quick questions. Alabama residents will go to the polls Tuesday to cast their votes in the special election to send either embattled Republican candidate Roy Moore or Democrat Doug Jones to the United States Senate. Allison, do you support Roy Moore?
I'm not an Alabama voter, so it doesn't really matter what I think. I think, though, I want to say this, if he does get elected to the Senate, he should undergo a Senate Ethics Committee investigation the second he enters that building.
Do you think that the credible allegations of sexual misconduct by Roy Moore against teenagers
Oh my gosh,
would be grounds for expulsion from the Senate, more than an ethics investigation, outright expulsion.
If the Senate's ethics committee says you need to resign, I fully support that, because at the end of the day, you know, you see Trent Franks, you see all these congressmen resigning, Al Franken. If Roy Moore, you know, does get elected and they tell him you need to resign, he should resign.
Now I'm going to ask you about Senator Franken. Did the Democrats wait too long to push out Al Franken?
Honestly, I think so, yes. When this happens, of course, it's awful because you think of the victims. But I think what's more important is trying to show that power will always be held accountable. And so, yes, this did take a little too long. Conyers did as well. And I think that we've learned, our Democratic leaders have learned from that, and they're going to work to try and get this done in a much quicker pace. And it's concerning. It really is. And I'm glad that at least we did something now. And I would hope that the Republican Party, no matter if you're an Alabama voter or not, will understand that this type of thing is not something you can play around with. It's not some small crime. This is extremely serious. It is an abuse of power, and it needs to stop now.
Next rapid fire question. The FCC unveiled its plan to dismantle the Obama-era net neutrality rule, calling for an end to regulations that required internet service providers to charge all companies equally for web content. Now, Levi, what do you make of this FCC decision?
Yeah, I think the decision, if it's made, that will, you know, require more and more just private people just in their homes trying to do the best they can to do work, to be productive, or even to have fun. And yet they're not able to do that because the internet's a little bit slower. They're not able to do that.
Thoughts on the net neutrality decision?
I think it's a great one. I mean, one thing I want to point out is the fact that they're removing a ban on paid prioritization, which is essentially jargon for a service provider cannot speed up content for some price. And so I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of misinformation about net neutrality, but overall I support the decision.
I promise you that after this decision is made, you will have people who will go on their internet and their internet access will be slower when accessing some sites. It's just simple.
This is the status quo before 2015. It's, you know, it wasn't dystopia then. I don't think it's going to be dystopia
Well,
now.
We're going to move on to the last rapid-fire question. In a historic break from tradition, President Trump officially took steps to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Allison, do you agree with this decision?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a long process. It's going to be slow. And the fact of the matter is West Jerusalem is a majority Jewish and Israeli citizens. And so if they move the embassy to West Jerusalem, I think it's well within their right. But Trump is still open to a two-state solution, which I want to point out.
Levi,
I would say, did they move the embassy to West Jerusalem, or did they just say Jerusalem in all the press releases?
They said Jerusalem, but at the end of the day...
So there goes the difference. Yes, West Jerusalem is predominantly Jewish. It is also, I would say, the capital of Israel any day. The problem is that this decision puts back 30 years, 40 years of foreign policy of trying to get a two-state solution on the table, because nothing said West Jerusalem there. It all said Jerusalem, indicating that East Jerusalem and Palestinians would not be cared about in any further matters. And you think, oh, that's hyperbole. No, in all honesty, go and look at the reactions of Muslim countries.
At the end of the day, though, they said they're going to be working with the Palestinians. It's going to be a long process looking at the security implications, they're looking at the logistical implications. This is going to be a very well thought out decision by the Trump administration, and I think it's a long time coming, and it's nice to see him holding on to some campaign promise.
They'll work with the Palestinians just like they worked with the Democrats, supposedly.
All right, we're going to wrap up our debate there. A terrific debate from both of you all day long here on Colonial Crossfire. Allison Kukais, Levi DeVos. Wow, I said your name very wrong. Allison Kukos, Levi DeVos. Thanks to both of you very much. When we come back, Michael Snell has our debate fact check.
Nearly 16 million people visit Washington, D.C. every year. Some come to witness, some to be heard. We come to make an impact, to learn from leaders, and to lead others. To create and create change. We are the George Washington University. We come to make history.
Welcome back. During our panel discussion, a team of fact-checkers monitored our debate. Michael Schnell is here now to fill us in on what we missed. Michael.
Thanks, Casey. Today's debaters were certainly prepared, knowing their facts and backing up their arguments with reliable information. However, there were a few moments where the debaters slightly misstated some details. One point that needs a closer look was when Levi said that 32 Republicans expressed their support for DACA. However, that number is actually 34. Also, Levi noted that the recently passed Republican tax bill is 529 pages and was released 45 minutes before the vote kicked off. However, the bill is actually 479 pages, was released at 8:30 p.m., and the final vote was calculated at 2 a.m. And finally, Levi mentioned that there were 829 amendments to the Obamacare legislation. While 788 amendments were submitted during the ACA markup period, only 161 of those were adopted in the final form. That's all for this edition of Colonial Crossfire. I'm Michael Schnell. Casey, back to you.
Thanks, Michael, for that fact check. And now to Spilled Milk. Here's our tribute to the very best of late-night political comedy.
Flynn sent the text while he was on the dais during Trump's inaugural address. He was making secret Russia plans while Trump was being sworn in. That's like interrupting your wedding to text your mistress. What? Oh, yeah, I do. Hold on. You up? Bloop.
Excuse me, I'm reflecting to everybody, so they have facts first.
All right, go
so
ahead.
We're talking apples and not bananas.
That's right. Don't be a banana. Give me some more apples.
I see a lot of bananas.
That's what our discourse has come to. Our journalists and political leaders are communicating via fruit. Give me some more apples. I see a lot of bananas. That's just sour grapes. I don't like the points you're raising, but aren't you glad to be here? This isn't exactly a plum gig. Hey, use your melon. Oh, honey-do.
Last week, Republican Senator Chuck Grassley told the Des Moines Register, I think not having the estate tax recognizes the people that are investing as opposed to those that are just spending every darn penny they have, whether it's on booze or women or movies.
And having said that, Senator Grassley jumped back into the black and white movie from whence he came.
This bill is like a bunch of mean girls got together and said, how can we write a burn book that clearly states exactly who we like and we don't like, but then also make it a tax plan?
All right, that's it for this episode of Colonial Crossfire. For all the latest updates from our political team at any time, be sure to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook, and check us out online at www.gw-tv.com. For all of us here at GWTV, I'm Casey Decker. Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us. We'll see you right back here next time.